2007 seems like so long ago. We were still listening to music on our iPods, upgrading to our brand new HD TVs, and we had no idea if the iPhone was going to be a successful thing or not. Times certainly were different in 2007. But 2007 is a year that holds a special place in my heart as a Browns fan. 2007 was the year that I truly fell in love with the Cleveland Browns for the first time in my life. See, I was 12 years old at the time, and I had watched the Browns be mediocre for most of that lifetime. But 2007 was the first time that 12-year-old boy got real hope instilled in his heart. It was my first bite into the drug that is being a Cleveland Browns fan. It was the first time I had a legitimate reason to be excited about the Browns, where I could actually have favorite players on the Browns that were actually good at football, which to a lot of other football fans might seem like a novel concept, but to those who are fans of teams similar to the Browns in that era, you know what I'm talking about. But as we all know, as a lot of Browns stories go, the story of the 2007 Browns ultimately ended in a very disappointing 2008 season. But with Derek Anderson recently retiring, it reminded me that everybody on that fabled 2007 team is now out of the NFL. So what I wanted to do was find out, where are they now? Phil Dawson is an undeniable, undoubted fan favorite in the city of Cleveland. He was one of the first players on the Browns expansion roster. Undrafted out of Texas in 1998, Phil bounced around teams for a couple years until he found a home with the expansion Browns. And find a home did he, because he stuck with the Browns for 13 years. It's no lie and it's no exaggeration to say that in the 13 years that Phil Dawson was a Brown, from expansion till 2013, he was undeniably the one single most consistent thing in the entire organization. In those 13 years, Phil kicked through 6 head coaching regimes, 5 different general manager, and 3 different ownerships. And through all the dysfunction, through all the chaos, through all the garbage, there was good old Phil on 4th and long, ready to get you 3 points whenever you needed it. Phil Dawson, in his 13 years as a Brown, eventually passed Lou Groza as the franchise leader in field goals made. After Phil left the Browns in 2013, he spent a few years with the 49ers and most recently seemingly ended his career with the Arizona Cardinals, as it seems that old age has gotten the best of good old Phil. And hey, old age finally getting Phil Dawson in 2018 is pretty good when this guy was in the same draft class as Peyton Manning. Nowadays, it's unclear what's next for Phil Dawson, because he can easily be picked up by another NFL team, but he can also easily never play another NFL football game again, as he is 44, and it does seem like his age is really starting to affect his kicking. But whatever the future holds for Phil Dawson, there will always be a sentimental home for him in the city of Cleveland, where he is beloved. Josh Cribbs was an absolute beast on special teams on both sides of the ball. In the game that was played in the mid-2000s, he was a dominating force on special teams. Josh Cribbs certainly has a special place in my heart as a Browns fan, because he was my first favorite Browns player. He was the first dude I wanted to get a poster up of on my wall, because Josh Cribbs was just awesome. His highlights and kick returns weren't because he was the slightest of foot player or he put on the fanciest moves. His highlights were there because he put his head down and ran over anybody who dared to tackle him. And that is a style of play that will always endear you to football fans in the Midwest. For a while, Josh Cribbs was the face of the Cleveland Browns as the team continued to peddle out subpar, non-NFL quality offenses year after year. It literally got to the point to where the only hope that Browns fans ever had in scoring was in kick and punt returns. And seeing how bad the defenses were in that era, there weren't a lot of punt returns. Josh Cribbs is currently tied with the NFL record for most kickoff return touchdowns with 8, and throughout his career with the Browns, he made 3 Pro Bowls. But in 2013, after he left the Browns, things really went downhill for Josh Cribbs as injuries and just his style of play and the toll that it took on his body started to really take effect on his level of play, as he was never the same player again. He went to Oakland, where he was cut before the season started. He was cut again by the New York Jets. The sad fact was that after years of being a resilient and remarkably tough player, Josh Cribbs' body simply gave out on him. He was released from the Colts in 2015, and he never played a down of football after that. But years later, he was picked up by the Browns as a special teams assistant coach, where he had the title for 2 years. But unfortunately, since Freddie Kitchens has taken over and has hired a new offensive coordinator, it seems that Josh Cribbs is again out of the job. D'Qwell Jackson is certainly not a player that is remembered a lot by Browns fans. When you bring up his name in conversation, a lot of people go, oh yeah, D'Qwell Jackson, but the conversation never goes further than that. That is because D'Qwell Jackson has had a remarkably consistent 10-year NFL career. What I think actually makes D'Qwell's consistency a bit more impressive than people give him credit for was that D'Qwell had to go through scheme changes almost every 2 years. He would go from a 4-3 to a 3-4. So essentially every 2 years his position was changing, and he was still able to keep up that level of consistency of play. D'Qwell played on the Browns for a long time and eventually shifted to the Colts, where he was on their team for about 4 years. In those 4 years, he put up the same remarkable numbers, but in his last few years, unfortunately, he would be at the center of some very unfortunate headlines. Like the incident in his last year where he allegedly assaulted a pizza driver, and of course being the inciting incident to the entire Deflategate scandal. D'Qwell retired after the 2016 season, capping a remarkably consistent and understated career with one of the league's biggest scandals and an uncharacteristic PED suspension. In his years since retiring, it seems that D'Qwell has really laid low and just tried to enjoy retirement. Now, Derek Anderson is some who fans may feel like is an easy target for jokes about being a bad quarterback or being a disappointment, but I have a lot of respect for Derek Anderson. See, Derek Anderson was a 6th-round pick in 2005 out of Oregon State, and he somehow found a way to have a 13-year career in the NFL. And hell, Derek Anderson even made a Pro Bowl in his long career. And sure, he was never a star or a guy you would feel comfortable with as your starting quarterback, but he lasted in the league 13 years. And look at how many quarterbacks are drafted in the 3rd, 2nd, and even the 1st round who don't make it half as long in the NFL as Derek Anderson does, and you have to show some respect to the man. And hell, of the 14 quarterbacks drafted in the 2005 NFL draft, there's only 2 that has outlasted Derek Anderson as far as the NFL career has gone. There's Ryan Fitzmagic and there's Aaron Rodgers. So honestly, hats off to Derek Anderson, because relatively speaking, he's had a spectacular NFL career. Now, Anderson, of course, had his most noteworthy season as a Cleveland Brown in 2007, where he threw for 3,800 yards and about 29 touchdowns. And after that magical Pro Bowl season, things kind of balanced out for Derek Anderson, as he never reached that level of success again, and followed up the 2007 season with a extremely disappointing 2008 season, which included Romeo Crennel playing quarterback yo-yo with Brady Quinn and Derek Anderson the whole season. Now, after the 2009 season, Derek Anderson was released from the Browns, and it was there that he was picked up by the Cardinals, who actually made the decision to start Derek Anderson for a bunch of games. He started 9 games, he lost all but 2 of them. But then after that season, it was where Derek Anderson found his career-defining role and was able to settle into a spot for a very long time. And that was as Cam Newton's backup on the Carolina Panthers, as he was the backup for the Carolina Panthers for 7 seasons. And as recently as last year, while the Bills were scrambling to find anybody who could play quarterback who's not named Josh Allen so they don't ruin their rookie, they plucked Derek Anderson from free agency and decided to start him for 2 games. And after those 2 games, in the offseason, Derek Anderson decided to call it quits and end what was already a remarkable and improbable career for a 6th-round pick out of Oregon State. Now we go from a player who disappointed in the long run but eventually found his role as a backup to a guy who is the true model of consistency and professionalism. Joe Thomas, of all the players who have played in the 19 years in the expansion era for the Cleveland Browns, is undoubtedly the first homegrown expansion player that is undoubtedly a Hall of Famer. There is really not much to say that hasn't been said about Joe Thomas's career because of how remarkably consistent and remarkably excellent his career was. In a 10-year career where everything around Joe Thomas was tumultuous at best, all Joe Thomas did was put his head down and work and be the best to play his position in his era. He was always there, he was always healthy, he was always available, and he was the best left tackle in the NFL from snap 1 to snap 10,363. And yes, that is correct. Up until the injury that eventually ended Joe Thomas's career, Joe Thomas did not miss a single snap in his NFL career. Throughout an NFL career that gave him nothing but excuses to lash out. But through all the turmoil, Joe Thomas never did that. Joe Thomas never forced his way out of Cleveland. Joe Thomas never complained. He just put his head down, went to work, and remained positive. It's truly unfortunate that almost as soon as Joe Thomas has officially retired, that this team has started to turn its corner and seemingly has found their franchise quarterback that had eluded Joe Thomas for all of the 10 years of his career. And part of me wonders, what if Joe worried about himself more? What if he took off a few plays here or there, took off a few games here or there throughout his career, and preserved his body in order to make this run that the Browns are making? Part of me wonders what that would be like. But then another part of me is reminded that Joe Thomas would have his career no other way. You know, this brings me to an old story I remember hearing Joe Thomas tell in a radio interview years ago. And he was asked, what is the one thing that he hopes for or dreams for when it comes to the rest of his playing career and what he hopes to achieve as a Cleveland Brown? I remember Joe Thomas definitively saying that he wanted to run out of the tunnel at Cleveland Browns Stadium for a home playoff game. That was the goal, that was the one thing he wished he could have in his career. Now with the Browns seemingly on the track, hopefully, to have a home playoff game this season, if everything that is on paper pans out, I wish some way, somehow, as a Browns fan, as somebody who has admired Joe throughout his career, that he can get the moment that he was unjustly robbed of throughout his NFL career because of incompetence and dysfunction, and be able to lead the Browns out of the tunnel at First Energy Stadium for a home playoff game. Because Joe Thomas, with everything that he dealt with throughout his NFL career, deserves an ending no less picturesque than that. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this little what happened to the 2007 Browns story. Let me know in the comment section if there are more stories of old Browns players or old Browns past that you would like to inform the rest of the fan base about. And also, if you have fond memories of that 2007 Browns season like I do, let me know in the comment section what are some of your favorite memories from that season. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if you really like what you saw today, then consider ringing that notification bell so you can know when I upload, and I upload 3 times a week. And if you have a buck or two to spare, please consider joining our Patreon page at patreon.com/worsttake. And if you do become a patron, you can have your name added to this cool ticker at the bottom of the screen. But again, guys, thank you for watching and have a great night.